at biodiversity, it's such a vast subject.
When the biodiversity of other countries are decreasing,
how we conserve the species. So
Field surveys identifying species, and they actually focus on three basic entities of biodiversity.
Zampula and a warm welcome to the Summer STEM Forum 2023 themed Biodiversity Conservation in Bhutan. I'm Sonam Peldin, your host for today, and knowing the importance of biodiversity conservation in Bhutan, we have three speakers with us today. To give a brief introduction, Mr. Tandiwandi is the Conservation Stewardship and Education Programs Lead with WWF Bhutan. With a background as a former civil servant and a deep love for environment, he brings a wealth of knowledge and infectious enthusiasm to the table. He tries to discover the beauty of nature and immerse himself in its wonders to become a catalyst for positive change. Our second speaker is Mr. Choki Gelsen. He's the Deputy Chief Biodiversity Curator at NBC Bhutan. Mr. Choki takes charge of the Biodiversity Information Management Systems, heads the National Invertebrates Inventory Programs, and even holds the Secretariat to the National Biodiversity Strategies and Action Plan. His work on fire ecology and project management has sparked a flurry of journal papers and books. Our third speaker is Ms. Sangedema. She's the Communication Officer at RSPN. She has a degree in Media and English Studies. Armed with social media and communication ideas, she embarked on a new adventure at RSPN as the Communication Officer. Now I would like to invite our speakers for a short presentation. So I would like to invite Mr. Tandin first.
Hello, good morning, and Kuzudongpo, everyone. It's such a wonderful feeling today to be part of this Summer STEM Forum, Women in STEM. It gives me a thrill to be participating in this wonderful initiative. I'd like to share a few things that I've been working on that I know a little bit about. It's about biodiversity conservation, biodiversity survey, and monitoring in Bhutan. I'll try to be as brief as possible in the interest of time. If you look at biodiversity, it's such a vast subject. Often we get overwhelmed by what it is. For politicians, it is something that they can actually bank on. For specialists, it is something that they can specialize on. And for people like us, it is something that we baffle with. In Bhutan, biodiversity survey actually started with the beginning of establishing our protected areas, national parks, wildlife sanctuaries, and strict nature reserves, because establishing such parks and sanctuaries require to document what we actually have in the wild. Unless we know what we have, we would not know what we need to conserve and what we should utilize. So that's the basis for it. So traditionally, biodiversity conservation, survey, and monitoring, I think, actually started with this traditional methodology of doing field surveys, identifying species, and they actually focus on three basic entities of biodiversity, namely flora, fauna, and avifauna, the bird life, so to speak. What they actually do, they go into the field, try to look at it visually and document everything that they see, and collect specimens of plants, put it in the herbarium for future reference. When it comes to mammal surveys, I think it's much more challenging because you do not see them as you see plants and trees in the wild. For that, they use techniques known as sign survey, scat identification, and of course, interviewing local people in the field. What they actually do, they look for bug marks, signs of wildlife on the trails, in the forest floors, and they also look at scats and try to identify them, whether it belongs to a cat species or an ungulate, or whether it's a tiger or something like that. And they also rely on local interviews, information from local people who reside in that area to authenticate what they actually guessed would be the species in the field. So that is the traditional way of actually trying to survey and document faunal species. And I think in the interest of everybody, I think I'll try to focus more on faunal species survey. It has evolved over the years from science surveys, from interviews, to scat identification. Now we have moved on to the camera traps. There's a technology that evolved way in the 90s, I think. in the late 90s, that was actually evolving in the world. And in Bhutan, we did not have camera trap survey technology. Even we have heard of it, but we never even tried to do it. But while doing surveys for the Tumsingla National Park, it's now called Prumsingla National Park, I think that was the first time in year 2000 that Bhutan actually got a camera trap picture of a male tiger, a robust picture of a tiger. That was such an excitement. It was recorded at an elevation of 3,000 meters. And it was such an excitement for all of us. Particularly, it authenticated that Bengal tigers, which was believed to be found only in the lowlands, could actually exist high up in the mountains at the elevation of 3,000 plus. That was such an excitement then. And over the years, we have now reached to a much more advanced technology called the eDNA, environmental DNA technology. That actually is more high-tech and more efficient and more, in terms of covering areas of survey, it is more quick and efficient. Bhutan has actually embarked into eDNA survey methodology technique recently. It has been over a year now that the Department of Forest has actually tried to pilot it. It is a technique which actually tries to utilize DNA extraction from the environmental samples. It could be soil samples, it could be water samples, it could mean other things, even air, for instance. But in Bhutan, I think we started with the water samples because that was the easiest thing to do. Why that sample? Because it is very difficult to camera trap or look at elusive species. Some are very small, some are microbes, some are very difficult to detect. In such a case, if you get a sample of water sample, because it is evident that these animals go to the water to take a bath, to drink water, and do whatever they want to. The genetic materials could be hair samples, could be skin samples, fall into the water, and those samples actually serve as the genetic material that people can extract it and do DNA sequencing to identify the actual species that is prevalent in that area. So that was one of the techniques that Bhutan is actually adopting now. But the challenge is to do that, it is similar to the herbarium specimens, because to do that you need, again, recorded specimens of DNA sequencing, which you can actually match and identify and authenticate the actual species. Unless you have that reference data established already, it's quite challenging. And for Bhutan, I think there hasn't been a reference document for the Himalayan region as such, but I think there are certain species already done. So for Bhutan to get into that sort of a high-tech technology, I think first and foremost it's important to have reference data documented first so that you can actually match it with what you have actually identified in the field. So those are the techniques that we have. And the most interesting thing about this is a French company called SpyGen. I think they were actually the pioneers in this field. And they have developed such an interesting technology. They are actually developing a mobile laboratory, DNA analysis laboratory, which they can move on. They have all the equipment there, they have the expertise, they have the techniques all built in the laboratory, mobile laboratory. But I think it's been practiced elsewhere in Europe and other countries, maybe in Japan. But for Bhutan, I think that is something which is very interesting, but I think it will be quite challenging because of the rugged terrains that we have and accessibility to sites. That mobile lab, what it does actually is it goes to the site where you actually pick the sample, DNA samples, and instantly on site they do all the analysis and they come up with that DNA sequencing, which is very efficient, very interesting, and at the same time, the samples are very fresh when they actually analyze and ensuring very, very, very minimal contamination of samples extracted. So those are some of the things that we are advancing on. And I would say that it's an exciting moment for Bhutan because we have got into this eDNA technique testing now, and then I think government is very interested about this, and as WWF, as a conservation partner of the country, we are very supportive of this idea, and we will try to explore this and see how it will be useful for Bhutan. And we hope in the future, if we can really adopt this technology and we can really implement it, I think it would really, really save time and resources to have a rapid kind of biodiversity survey and monitoring in the field at a larger extent. Thank you.
Kuzambola. I'm Choki Yeltsin, and I look after the Biodiversity Information Management Division and the Invertebrate Program at the National Biodiversity Center. So today, running very fast because of time constraint, I'll be talking on biodiversity conservation efforts to fulfill the international and national targets. So coming to the species diversity in Bhutan, here we looked at across the 7 kingdoms. Scientifically recorded, we have more than 11,000 species across all the 7 kingdoms. But the last kingdom, Archaebacteria, we couldn't find. It doesn't mean that the species doesn't exist in Bhutan. It's just that researchers haven't discovered the species yet. So comparing the species of Bhutan to the world, so we are almost, Bhutan consists of almost 1% of the world's biodiversity, and is still exploring and is still discovering new species, new records, new to science species. Comparing to the unit-wise area size of the country, Bhutan is very rich in biodiversity. Now we can confidently say that Bhutan is rich in biodiversity, because when we say rich in biodiversity, then we need to get backed up by the data, and then data needs to be backed up by specimens. That's why we need this data and specimens. So coming to the taxonomic classification, so we have Trichophytes, our flowering plants of more than 4,900, and then we have insects, vertebrates, and other. And coming to the species discovered new to science in the last decade from 2010 to 2023. So you can see the increasing trend of growing species. When the biodiversity of other countries are decreasing, Bhutan's biodiversity is increasing. So which shows that the conservation efforts in our countries are really good and is very efficient. And if you look at the classification wise in the groups, then we have highest new species discovered in moths group, followed by snails and slugs, and then plants, fishes, beetles, and dragonflies, bees, wasps, aphids, and all. And if I show you some of the new species discovered in last decade, right, starting from the national flower, which is a new species upgraded to Meconopsis kakidiana. Kaki means happiness in Bhutan, so it's named as Meconopsis kakidiana. And then we have a dragonfly and damselfly named after His Royal Highness Gelse. And then we have a new orchid named after Her Majesty the Queen, Spathoclotis chichene. And then other orchid and snail species as well. And coming to the traits, so according to IPBES in 2022, so almost 1 million species are threat of extinction. And in last decade, almost 900 species has already extinct. Now, why the species are getting extinct and why we need to conserve biodiversity? And there are many factors, as I've shown: land conversion, climate change, global warming, invasive alien species, forest fire, human intervention, and all this. So in Bhutan, we have two kind of conservation strategies: in situ conservation, ex situ conservation. Ex situ means conservation outside of its habitat, natural habitat. In situ means conservation inside of its natural habitat. For example, in situ conservation, we have protected areas, biological corridors. And ex situ, we have gene banks, royal botanical gardens, and all. And coming to the core functions, what we have been doing, the National Biodiversity Center. So we look at bioprospecting and access and benefit sharing. So we look at the plants, look at the potential we can develop natural products, anti-aging cream or massage oil or perfumes and all. So these are the works that bioprospecting carry out. And we have invertebrate repository where we collect all the specimens of all the insects, invertebrates such as snails, plant gene bank where we keep the seeds, crops, so that when Bhutan faces a doomsday, then we resupply the seed stock to the country. And we have animal gene bank. Same wise with the plant gene bank. This also we conserve the DNA, semens, and also now we started with embryo conservation. We have herbarium where we collect dried plant specimens. So we have collections since last century from the collection from British India. And Royal Botanical Garden where we collect native living plants. So we focus on native. And we have few in situ conservation. So here we involve farmers for plant and animal conservation in on farm. And coming to the Bhutan Biodiversity Portal. So this is a website where it banks on the citizen science data documentation of Bhutan Biodiversity Portal. And here we have more than 83,000 observations of all species. More than 7,000 species are being documented through the Bhutan Biodiversity Portal. So the website is biodiversity.pt. Coming to the legislations. So as per everybody knows the Constitution, Article 5, that deals basically to conserve the environment, biodiversity, and then to maintain a minimum of 60% of Bhutan's forest. So in line with this, we have come up with the National Biodiversity Studies and Action Plan. So now we'll come up with a new NBSAP. This is where the national targets are aligned with the international targets, and then we are reporting to the UN Convention on Biological Diversity. So this document, NBSAP, act as a national guiding document and is a living document for any biodiversity conservation in Bhutan. And now we will have a new National Biodiversity Strategies Action Plan with more than 20 targets. So this will be based on the Kunming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, so which was adopted in COP15, December 2022 in Montreal. Right now we have started with the stock taking of the previous NBSUP to learn the lessons, the failures, why the targets are not achieved. Only 3 targets have been achieved in previous NBSUP. Globally, 0 targets are achieved. So Bhutan has been still ahead with 3 targets achieved. But now with the new NBSUP, we need to we'll try to make it more ambitious, measurable, result-based, and then more achievable. If I tell you briefly about the Global Biodiversity Framework, so here, this is aligned with the UN Sustainable Development Agenda 2030. And then the vision is to live harmony with nature by 2050. And by 2030, we will restore, maintain all the biodiversity in the world. And then the biodiversity finance mechanism are in place. The developed countries has agreed to finance the developing countries. And then we have 4 goals with 23 targets set. And this is aligned with the vision of the Convention of Biological Diversity. 196 countries are member to the UN. So here we align with conservation, sustainable utilization, and then access and benefit sharing. And this mandate is also with the Bhutan's National Biodiversity Center. And coming to the targets, so here, as I told you before, the targets we're aiming is to have measurable, backed up by science and data, specimens, and then have a result-based objectives. And some of the targets are to cut the food waste into half, and then to also to ensure gender equity at all levels of action, and then let all genders participate in decision making related to biodiversity and nature, and then also to prevent the introduction and then control of invasive alien species, including plants and insects. So coming to the targets, so 30% of the world's protected areas will be conserved. And for Bhutan, it's very good news that we are already having more than 50% conserved. So now Bhutan will be maintaining what is conserved, and then reduce near to 0 loss of biodiversity high areas, and then reduce by half both excess nutrients, pesticides, and all harmful subsidies, and then also to prevent the introduction of invasive alien species. These invasive alien species are the species coming from outside countries into Bhutan and then invading the native plants and then destroying all our native species. Example like giant African land snail and kelposhing. And then also coming to the private sectors. So here companies, financial institutions are required to have transparency of their harmful subsidies or harmful operations or supply to the environment and nature. So we'll also involve the private sector and then the financial institutions. The most important one also for the COP15, digital sequence information. So here we also have to need to have the digital DNA database, as the Tanyan sir said preferably, data referencing center. And then this is one of the obligations that Bhutan is also facing. Not only Bhutan, the developing countries are facing challenges. Developed countries already have all the databases, all the laboratories in set condition. So Bhutan will be just initiating carefully according to our national legislations. Digital sequencing information refers to data from DNA or RNA from any species, which can be stored digitally. Once you take out the DNA, then you can also store in a chip. That's called 4th generation DNA storage. And then we need to ensure the benefits arising from DNA storage. We need to have this fair and equitably sharing from back to the communities, back to the citizens, and then to the world. And here we are also planning to develop capacity. Since Tanyan sir also mentioned that we lack capacity, and then we need to develop the facilities, capacities and all. And then it will be covered by our access and benefit sharing policy of 2015. Thank you very much.
Good example, my name is Sangya Dema and I work as a communication focal in RSP. So firstly, I would like to thank STEM in Bhutan, Women in STEM in Bhutan for this opportunity. The topic that I'm going to share about is the leveraging, how we leverage technology into the conservation, and especially with how our office is doing that. So just briefly, if I share about our office, so we are known as Royal Society for Protection of Nature, RSPN, and we are the country's oldest environmental NGO, which was founded by His Majesty the Fourth King. And this is the mission, vision of our organization, and we work on the different thematics areas. And currently, we work on the 6 thematics area, and these are all based on the national and international priorities in line with SDG as well. So if I just share what we're working on, so it's like we work on species and habitat, we work on wetland and freshwater, we work on environmental education, we work on sustainable livelihood, waste and pollutions, climate change adaptation and resilience. And today, what I want to share is about how we conserve the species. So from all the 6 thematic areas, I'm going to focus on the species, especially on black-necked crane and white-bellied heron. This is black-necked crane, so we refer it as Tung Tung Kamola, and it's reverted as the heavenly birds. If I just share very small information about its black-necked crane, so it's reverted as a heavenly bird and is also compared as an elegant bird, and it's also have a very societal values in our country. And this is the distribution range in Bhutan. So in Bhutan, it's recorded in Wangdi Phodrang, it's recorded in Bumtang, it's recorded in Tashiangte, in Lhensila. These are some of the pressures or the threats that they are facing currently. With the intervention of technologies, what we're doing is we're doing research and monitoring, we're doing environmental education, we're managing habitat, we're doing also habitat management, we're also having this global coordination and partnership, we're having this community stewardship and sustainable development. Today, I'm not going to touch on all the topics, but I'm going to specify on the research and monitoring. RSPN initially started with the conservation of black-necked crane in 1987. So if you count, it's 36 years in conservation. So we started with this population survey of this black-necked crane. And this is the picture that was taken in 1998. So this is the tagging of this black-necked crane. With due course of time, with advancement of technologies, what we have been doing is we started with the simply tagging, and now we have doing the satellite taggings. And with this satellite tagging, what we are getting is that to save this black-necked crane, for your information, black-necked crane was as per the IUCN red list, so it was categorized as vulnerable, but we have downlisted and it's now into near threatened category. And to space this species, it's important that we know about the habitat range, distribution range. So this satellite tagging is very important. So it has given us, over the due course of time, it has given us very important data. So we have known about the birds that are coming to Bhutan, where they're flying from, the distribution range, and all those things we have known. Since 1998, we have started the tagging, and till date, we have tagged 18 birds. 18 birds. So it's not just RSPN that is doing, but we also have collaboration with International Crane Foundation, JICA, NABU, UICER, and collaborated with international and national organization and offices. Through the satellite tagging, we have known where are they, how they are flying, and all those their behaviors. So this was I got this picture from Bird Cherub. So he was doing this dietary composition of this black-necked crane, and he shared that through this satellite tagging, they knew the bird habitat, and they also did this fecal collection, and this was one of the things that they found out. So this they found out that this black-necked crane grains that they found in the paddy field are one of their favorite food. So this is just roosting sites and areas, and in Bhutan we have currently 6,719 hectares of foraging and roosting sites in Bhutan. Through this satellite tagging that we are venturing today, with the advancement of technology, we are able to understand about the birds' behavior and all those things. So this is Crane Samten. So we have started tagging them in 2019 in Bumdaling with our partners UICER. Before they come to Bhutan, so they have the little stopovers that they have. So they're coming all the way from Tibet. Then they're coming in India. They spent few days in different areas, and then they come back to Bhutan. So this information, all of this data, migratory routes gives us a very important data. With the usage of satellite, it's very important because this helps us in giving us to plan our conservation measures. So this is one of the instant that have helped us. So we have this crane Samtin, we have this crane Wangchen and Kille. In addition to that, for the black neck crane conservation, what we have done is in Pobjika, so we have done this underground electrifications, and we have also put in the flight diverters. So flight diverter is basically to avoid collisions with the electric wires. So we put in flight diverters. So this is mainly in collaboration with BPC and Department of Forest and Park Services. And this is just the count of the black neck crane that we had last year. Beside that, we do this roof site maintenance and all this. And very interesting is that, most of you must be aware. So we also recorded the first BNC breeding in Bhutan. So it happened in Ha. So it was a very good data for us to plan about, because till date we have never recorded BNC breeding in Bhutan. So we were just a roosting area, but it was a new information, and such data are very important. So for the conservation of black neck crane. This is just a festival that we happen to have in Pobjika. We have the annual Black Neck Crane Festival. This is to mainly educate communities and every Bhutanese citizen about the black neck crane and its importance in the ecosystem. So this is for the black neck crane. So I'll not take much of time, so I'll just share about the white-bellied heron. So that's happening. So white-bellied heron is called it as Chubja Poka. It's critically endangered. So, and there's like less than 60 individuals left worldwide, and Bhutan have like 45%, and 80% of the nests are found in Bhutan. And as per the IUCN Red List, we have found that it has extinct in Nepal and Bangladesh as well.